Let me. Can I switch cameras?
Oh, you got camera one, camera two?
Oh yeah, buddy.
Wow. Just for the record, I'm actually recording this now, as this will be on the podcast.
Okay.
And if you guys want to see Adam's switch from camera one to camera two, go to YouTube because it literally just happened, and it was pretty epic.
I don't know which one's better. I mean, these both look terrible,
They,
honestly.
they look great, and well, you know what? The one you were just on gives a much better view of the stunning
Elk rack.
horns. The rack, sorry, yeah, pardon me, the rack behind you, yeah.
If I stand in just the right spot.
You become the beast.
Yeah, that's right. The funny thing about that display is like I used to do it on all my sales calls, and but the desk was lowered. Now I have the standing desk, and so it just doesn't look.
You need to add some stacks to that.
I have to completely redo it. Yeah, or just lift it up on books or something like that. But
I want to say, Adam, thank you so much for making time for me, as you have seemed to always have done since you and I met. I'm gonna say like 3 years ago, 4 years ago,
hmm.
more than that.
Yeah, I think it was around that time. Must have been something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've always enjoyed our conversations, and I've always appreciated your point of view and your perspective, and why I don't feel like we don't always agree on things, which I kind of like about you. There are a lot of similarities I feel like we draw from each other, and I was inspired to invite you onto the podcast for for this episode because of an Instagram post that you posted 2 days ago. So just 2 days ago, you posted something. It struck a chord in me, triggered me, if you will,
Okay.
and here we are. And you were so kind again, like I said, to give me your time. And the post was, I'm going to do a bad job of describing the kind of style of the art, but like the outdoors 1960s
Ah,
hunter with a rifle, and there's two bears, and I don't know if it's like the scope of which the image is supposed to be taken, or if it actually is this way. But there's one bear that is being hunted, and it is as the picture says, the actual bear, like
yeah.
they're hunting. And then there's the other bear, which is seemingly 10 times the size. There it is.
There
And
it
it
is.
is self-doubt. So I'll put Adam's Instagram handle in the show notes. You guys can go check it out. And the other bigger bear was self-doubt. And right away, I was just like, I have to get Adam on because I want to pick his brain. I want other people to hear your story. And I also want to be able to talk to you about my own self-doubt and how I've battled it and continue to battle it. It still exists. I think it exists in everyone as they go through this journey that is life, both in personal relationships, internal relationship with yourself, but then also looking at what you're doing with Civilian Strong in your business and like really stepping out as an entrepreneur. So I think it's a great spot to start. Is that picture like so for you? I'm assuming it's an original work of art. It's something,
No, somebody sent that to me. That was care of the internet, you know.
right?
So someone sent that image to me. I have a couple of different friends that I send memes back and forth with. It's a great way to waste time, and
And procrastinate.
that's right, procrastinate. But in
Yeah.
2020, like, what else are you gonna do? So, and actually, I don't believe that. That's a joke too. But yeah, he sent that. Buddy sent that to me, and I was like, oh man, like that. That's funny, but it hits home
Yeah.
uh, because the smaller bear is the real bear that you should be terrified of. And I've actually saw five grizzly bears just a few months ago.
Right.
One in particular was massive. Like they're huge. Like this thing was the size of a small. Do you remember the old Honda Civic hatchbacks? They're kind of
Yes.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
little tiny ones. The newer ones are bigger and more sedan like, but the old Civics were they're this bear was the size of one of those Civics. It was insane.
Right. So they were tiny for vehicles, but they're big for bears.
Big for bears. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he could have been 600 pounds or more. Like it's really hard to say how much he weighed, but There was one in Squamish recently that was 7. They estimated him to be, I think. Oh, actually, they tranquilized him, and he was 750 pounds.
Wow.
And so seeing a grizzly in the wild is like potentially terrifying. And so this immediately made me laugh because the bear in the image is taller than the guy, but the self-doubt is just crushingly huge. Like it's bigger
Yeah,
than all of them, and it's
it's
massive.
engulfing everything. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
So what? So obviously there is humor in it, but for like you said, there's something in that image that really spoke to you. Like there's a truth to it. So walk me through. You and I haven't really connected in depth for a while.
Yeah.
So walk me through like where are you with that process? Where are like how does self-doubt come up for you, and how does it impact you? And what do you find yourself doing to deal with it when you are feeling it?
Oh, it's a tough one because it's a persistent thing for me personally that's been around, like that has like just been part of my, whatever you want to call it, psychology, I guess,
Hmm.
for a very long time. And you know, it's something that I think about, I take notes on, I read books about. It's always something to be I think it's been something that I've personally been trying to work on. When it comes to, one of the things I've noticed is that when it comes to physical activities, sports and hunting, whatever, it used to be snowboarding, it used to be CrossFit for a long time, skateboarding for a very long time. I had no problem putting myself out there and looking stupid as I messed up and as I couldn't finish a workout, or I mean, I never didn't finish a workout, but maybe didn't finish it on time.
Right, right, right.
Right. Snowboarding tricks, things like that. Like I could physically mess up a trick and look bad in front of other people or hurt myself, whatever. Um, for some reason, when I do physical activities, my confidence level is extremely high, or at least high enough to take the risks, right?
Right.
But when it comes to my ideas, like let's say I want to write a book or this business, Civilian Strong, that I'm building, far more difficult to put that idea baby out into the world. I even hate
Hmm.
I don't even like that term, but like
Right. Yeah, I get what you're
you know,
saying.
yeah, I don't like that term, but to take that idea and say, listen, I think this is worth paying attention to. I want you to pay money for it, etc. Um, that's been much more challenging. And I'll tell you, I think one of the things that where self-doubt can creep in, and I think a lot of people can relate to this in 2020. And I'm not speaking for everybody. I'm just saying, like, based on my conversations with other people, especially this year, is that when you're alone and you're working from home and you're isolated,
Hmm.
it's way easier to be in your head. And when you're in your head all the time, self-doubt can be a very powerful, crushing thing. Self-doubt for me tends to, like I'm a people person, to, I would say, to a degree, right?
Hmm.
Not to the extreme, but I'm definitely not an introvert. I'm somewhere in the middle of those two things, right? And I get energy from talking to people. That's why I said yes to this podcast. I mean, not only did I want to reconnect with you, but
Hmm.
there's no fear whatsoever that we're going to talk about anything that's going to be uncomfortable. Like it's two people. If
Right.
it's me on my own and I'm working on an idea, oh, like, is this a good, like, should I make this decision or that decision? Like the doubt just creeps in at every opportunity.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a variety of things that help with that. I mean, taking care of myself physically is one of those things. Like when I'm in good shape, and this year that's been a heck of a challenge. You know, the doubt is lower. I think if you're operating physically at peak performance, and usually to operate at even like a pretty good level physically,
Hmm.
you are doing things that naturally counteract doubt. Because if you're training, and I'm not just talking about exercising, like if you're training with a purpose and you have a goal in mind and you're working a plan to get there,
Hmm.
that's a very empowering thing. And it bleeds out into, or like it sort of affects the other areas of your life as well.
Hmm.
um, So if you're winning in one area of your life and then you start to win in other areas of your life, the levels of doubt will come down, I think, overall. At least I've noticed that for me. I don't know if that's true for you.
Yeah, no, I don't know if there's any correlation with that, although I do prescribe 100% to like when my relationship and my life is on fire, my business is on fire.
Yeah.
And when my life is basically me, my family, and my partner. That's what makes up like my life category, if you will. When that's suffering, when any area that is like in the negative, for example, just in regards to like how I would quantify it, then my business is as well. So I do feel there's a correlation there. For me, self doubt. For me, self doubt actually encourages movement. So
Mm.
it does for me the antithesis, perhaps, of what I'm understanding it does for you, where it's almost this, and I'm paraphrasing what you're saying here a bit, and feel free to jump in. It's almost like this paralysis by analysis. It's like, well, should I or shouldn't I? And well, what would they think? And what? For me, I am you on a skateboard. I am you in a workout. Like when it comes to my business, I'm like, I'm going to try whatever I can. And I'm okay with it, quote unquote, failing. Because for me, it's not actually a failure. So I don't know if I can be a canary in the mine shaft for you at all in regards to this process. And that wasn't my intention of having this conversation at all. Because I
Sure.
think there is a lot of commonality between you and I in regards to how we do cope with this and how we can cope with it moving forward.
I'm here for a therapy session. Like this is what I wanted. I was like, fix me. I'm like, oh, go on the call. Whatever you want me to say, just fix my problem.
I was hoping you're gonna fix me. Um, so yeah, for me, self doubt, and I've had it described to me, and now I describe it to others as and I think it was in the book Inner Size, where the author, whose name escapes me right now, but talks about the idea of we all have internally a light wolf and a dark wolf,
Mm.
and the one that we feed the most gets the strongest. And the dark wolf, we can all identify with that one being things like, self doubt or self deprecation or procrastination, things that don't actually ultimately serve what we're like our mission in life, if you will. Whether you're a 9 to 5 or an entrepreneur, you want to be the world's best husband or father, whatever it is, it's those things that take away from it. But so often we find ourselves feeding that dark wolf, so that that self doubt, that image that you put up is actually real because that self doubt Grizzly has been fed a ton, right? And we haven't been feeding enough the that light wolf, which is like, okay, the things that serve me and allow for me to move freely and put things out into the world with this like uninhibited, it doesn't matter. And I don't think it actually all really matters. And I'm reading right now a book called How to Get Rich or How to Be Rich. I'll put it in the show notes, but
Yeah.
he
Who's
says the guy that started Maxim magazine, the British guy.
Felix
Uh,
Dennis?
yeah, Felix Dennis. So even in the introduction, he talks about like I've had 1,000 ideas. I still have ideas. He talks about a gun that a gun that shoots out like Spider-Man's web at like someone breaking into your house. Doesn't harm them, but it stops them. And he's
Right.
like, that'll probably never be made. But it's about you just have to keep putting these ideas out, and eventually something is going to stick. Pardon the pun with the whole Spider-Man thing. So for me, not that I am here to say, Adam, like, come on, bud, let's do this. It's like pay attention to and embrace that dark wolf. But for me, when I hear it, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna like I just put the throttle down even more. I'm like, okay, guess what? It's not even ready yet. And I'm gonna release it. Like if you're gonna show up already on me, I'm gonna put my foot on your throat and say like it's going out. Whether it's a new program, a new offering, a blog post, a podcast, like all of those things. For me, I am you when you were or are skateboarding or when you're doing snowboard tricks, and you're like, I don't really like. If I fall, I fall. If I look silly, I look silly. But I won't know until I do it. So that's personally how I am with self doubt. It still exists. It's still there. I still feel it, but I don't allow for it to govern what I do. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
Oh, it absolutely does. Um, it's something that, I've definitely been reading about, I've thought about, I've experienced in my meditation practice. One of the things you learn by consistently meditating is, or one of like literally one of the like lessons that needs to be learned in order to have it like work
Hmm.
or have benefit is letting go of thoughts. And
Hmm.
self-doubt is just a thought. I'd say prior to really developing or investing time into developing a meditation practice, thoughts seemed far more important. And now I'm realizing like you can have a thought and you can just let it go, or you can look at it. And sometimes when those thoughts are also come with emotions or they're emotionally charged, they're harder to let go. It takes
Hmm.
more time, and it sometimes a lot of thoughts are reoccurring, right? It takes time for those synapses or whatever the
Like
physical,
the wiring, right?
the wiring, yeah, whatever the actual physical process is, it takes time for those to change or die off, or whatever the process is. And so with doubt, that is, I mean, doubt's also a mechanism that protects us, right? So it has a purpose, but the practice is to use your mind to make decisions without overindulging in that and getting sucked in. And so that's the practice that I'm personally working on.
Hmm.
I feel like it is tied to the meditation practice. It's benefiting from the meditation practice. It's almost like that's not why I meditate, but that practice and what I've learned helps me to apply it to areas of my life like doubt.
Yeah, it's like a byproduct. It's like when I first entered CrossFit, like years ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago now, um, probably more than that actually. The very first person that ever talked to me about it, he says, "Look, like we don't train biceps in here. You're just gonna get better biceps as a byproduct. Like it's just like you're gonna put in the work and you're gonna get like." So what you're saying is the exact same thing. Like you don't sit there with the intention of like, okay, meditation, like we're working on self doubt today. And
That's right.
but there are meditations that would probably cover that, guided meditations that are probably specific to that. So shout out to those meditations.
Yeah.
But what I hear you saying is it's like it's this holistic approach, and it just one of the many spokes of the wheel that is meditation is, hey, it allows for me to again see self doubt, hear it, recognize it, but then not, and to use your words, like not indulge in that story of like, okay, they then become your story.
Yeah.
So do you find that self doubt shows up for you in that in the way of like inaction or in procrastination or in again kind of a dramatic term, but like analysis or yeah paralysis by analysis?
Yeah, I would say all three of those things. The way that my mind tends to work when I think about, you know, business in particular, just because sales and marketing has been my career, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I see over the years lots of different ways and examples of how a company can market itself and generate sales and all the little details that go into that. Um, my mind tends to complicate things, and so I'll look at something and be like, oh yeah, okay, I can see you could market it this way, and then I can think of 10 other ways that it can be marketed and advertised, and then what are the add-ons? And the brain, like my mind just goes, and I have the skill of just vision. Like I can see a picture of what something could look like optimized and at its best and down the road. But reeling that back to the day to day, what's your most practical starting point, and how to put those ideas, that vision of the future, how to put that aside for the time being and focusing on like what's right now.
Yeah.
Just that's the harder thing to do. There are people out there, so I'm told, that are great implementers or operations people that are like, okay, well, what's right in front of us, and they
Yeah.
can focus and do those
Like
things.
they're linear. Yeah.
Yeah, my mind, it works a little like differently. I'm not saying it's different than everybody's, but it's just
No, it
different.
is. It is. That's a good thing.
Oh, everybody, yeah, yeah, sure. We all have a
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
um but anyway, so then where the self-doubt comes in is if I let that go too far, that process of like, when I think about Civilian Strong, I'm like, oh, well, there's, we could do a podcast, could do a book, and I can tell you 20 other things that I thought of that would be a good fit for the concept. But then it's like, okay, well, there's 20 things and you can't get any done. You need to focus in. And, that's the harder part for me, because I like to ideate. But then if you go too far with that, it turns into doubt, and it turns into too many things vying for your attention, and too many things in the mind just starts to kind of spin in circles.
Man, it's so interesting to be in this conversation right now, and I'm kind of having, without sounding too existential, kind of like an out of body experience in a weird sort of way, because the conversation that literally the words that you just used are coming through you to me, and I'm being selfish right now, but obviously the listeners are benefiting from it as well. But everything you just said is literally everything my therapist said to me last week, and I'll get to what I mean by all this. It's
Sure.
literally, I read Jim Collins' Good to Great, the
Yep.
Stockdale Paradox today.
Okay.
That is the Stockdale Paradox, as far as I'm concerned, like how I interpreted what you just said. Um, so basically, the issue that I'm having with where I'm at in many facets of my life, just to be completely candid, is I am very much like you. Like, I can optimize in my head and look at that finished product, and I can tell you about the $7 million architecturally built home that I'm going to build with my partner for us and his family. That's the elephant, right? But what I need to focus on, if like I had to eat the elephant, it's like it's one bite at a time. And I know that's such a cliche, and it's like an ironic image to have in your head, but that literally is how how I would interpret and articulate what you're saying. Is like, yeah, like I see all these things, to me the elephant, and I need to eat it, create it, bring it to fruition. But what I need to focus on is like, okay, I need to eat like the tail first,
Yeah.
and then the rump, and then the other part of the rump. And like, it's that is, as people who are wired like you and I, which is again like I'm gonna lump you in with me on this one, like, you know, um, maybe some unrealistic in regards to like how the society feels goals are, like unrealistic goals, like big dreamer, big visions, all those things. What I
Yeah.
feel like we need to do is look at someone like Jim Stockdale and what he has put down on paper for us, and say like, never lose faith on what can be, but be tied to your reality of like what is real today.
Yeah.
I just think that's so simple, beautiful, but so difficult to implement into our lives.
Yeah, I don't have a direct quote, but I think Ray Dalio has some thoughts around that too. Are you familiar with his
Oh
work at
yeah,
all?
I love Ray Dalio.
Yeah.
I quote him quite often. I think he's a genius, not just from a financial standpoint, but everything else. I just love how he thinks.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I love it. Very systems based. It's very pragmatic, and the stuff that he talks about doing, and that they apparently do at his company, is the way that I would prefer to operate with people. But I would say they're probably like a unicorn in terms of how they do things. Like,
Right.
really having frank conversations with people, like you really do that on an ongoing basis and challenge each other's ideas. And I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. If people listening um, want to dig into Ray Dalio's stuff, he's one of the wealthiest people in the world, and he's published a book, and now there's an app. I'm hoping the app will come to Canada because it just sounds really
Oh, I
interesting.
didn't realize there was an app. So there's a principles app.
Yeah, yeah, from the very outset, because what he talks about in his book is like they developed internal software for to help people inside the company at Bridgewater make decisions according to his methodology. And it's not just his methodology; it's known as his, but everyone has collaborated, and
Hmm.
other people have added to this. So, excuse me, they built software to help their internal teams pick apart ideas, facilitate meetings in a radically different way, and make decisions. And now they've created a public facing app, because people who are reading the book were saying, dude, like, you got to create an app, you got to help the rest of us.
Yeah.
So I'm keen to try it out, but it's not available in Canada yet. It's just in the US and I think like the UK or something like that. But
I think he listens to the podcast. So Ray, hit Adam up with the Canadian beta version
that's right.
ASAP.
That's right.
Let's quickly talk about reading for a bit. I feel like I come to this this fight of knowledge when it comes to books completely underarmed, because I feel like you are like smashing literature as I like slowly crawl through literature. You seem to always be sharing through your social media like impactful paragraphs or quotes or um, scenarios, stories. One, where does your is it something you've always had, like this kind of desire to just digest literature, both fiction, nonfiction? And then what are some books that you can share with myself and listeners that are like Adam Killam's, like, guys, you got to read these ones?
Oh man. So I'll answer the first question first, which is no, I didn't smash books, as you're putting it,
Yeah.
uh, like I do now. That was something that I developed in my 20s. But I would say that there was probably some hint of that when I was like, younger, like 13 or 14, when I first had um, when I got my first computer. It was a 386. I had a 14.4 dial-up modem. Eventually, I got a 28.8, which was the fastest in my area. And I knew that I had I was only the second person to get that modem because my uncle was the one that sold all the computers in our little town.
Oh, okay.
So I absolutely knew that, like in that area, I had the fastest dial-up. So back then, when it came to learning about computers, I was all in. Like I was fascinated with them, and I learned whatever I could. But the materials were sparse, right?
Hmm.
So then I went to finished high school, went to university, and I actually ended up dropping out of university, and that's when I moved out here. My plan was to I moved across the country, 40 pounds of luggage. Got here, I was going to snowboard and party in Whistler for a year, and then head back home and finish a degree. But when I got out here, I thought about things and basically was like, I need to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. Because if I go home, it's just going to be more of the same. And it wasn't good. Like when I was in Halifax, I was in a very dark place. I was working in the bar industry, going to school, doing terribly. And it once I got out here, I think it actually started at, just before I left. But regardless of whether it was here or there,
Hmm.
um, I started to look for answers, and I started to pick up books. And an entrepreneur that I met recommended Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it was in Rich Dad Poor Dad. There was a line where Robert Kiyosaki said something along the lines of like, the rich don't go to school, they go to seminars, they read
Hmm.
books, they look for knowledge elsewhere. And like the real education, sort of like, I'm extrapolating a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Think and Grow Rich was another one of those early books that I read. And so I it, Rich Dad Poor Dad, one of the original versions that I read back then, he actually had a list of books that he recommended people look at. And so I bought a few of those. And then what happened was it just started this cascade. And now I read like, both of these monitors are sitting on 4 books. I have 2 books right here. Like I have over 200 books on my iPhone. There's at least 100 books on the bookshelf back here. I've mostly stopped reading physical books, even though I really enjoy it. It's
Hmm.
just more practical to put them on your phone. And so some books that are, you know, man, really good. I mean, I'll talk about these two quickly. These 2 books aren't for everybody, but this one's called How to Go On Living When Someone You Love Dies.
Okay.
And I read this because at the end of December, or sorry, in October 2019, at the end of the year there, I lost my mom. And it was something that I mean, we could spend an hour, I could tell you
Hmm.
the story, but maybe on another call.
We'll do part two for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, part two. But I lost my mom, and it was a very traumatic experience. The way that it all played out, it was somewhat unexpected, and probably one of the hardest things that I've ever experienced in my life. And
Hmm.
2020 for me was not really about COVID. It was about trying to dig myself out of depression and just completely crashing after living with her for months and taking care of her while she was dying of cancer. So
Hmm.
I started to pick up books again. And this was one of the little books that literally made me realize that I wasn't going insane. And one of the first things he says in this book, he's like, if you've lost someone close to you, you might feel like you're going insane. And I literally felt that way. I started going to counseling, and I was looking for answers because I was like, I don't know what's happening. It was the most bizarre experience. This book reassured me that
you're not crazy.
You're not crazy. And this is, and then he goes through a bunch of different scenarios on what grief looks like. He lost both of his parents, and basically, went down this path of figuring out what was going on, and helped a lot of other people. And then, because there were no materials available, wrote the book to basically help others. The next one that I'm digging into right now, that I actually think is probably really timely and important, it's called Lost Connections.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so this is it's called Lost Connections: Uncovering the Real Causes of Depression and the Unexpected Solutions. So doesn't sound like an uplifting story.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. This guy basically, he's an author. He's written several different books. And again, this is related to where I've been in 2019, the headspace, or 2020. And he talks about sort of what traditionally psychologists and scientists and doctors thought depression was. And he digs into the science behind using drugs to help pull people out of depression. And it turns out that there's a whole rabbit hole there where the drugs are actually extremely ineffective.
Right.
And it turns out that they used to think, the mainstream wisdom, and actually still a lot of it is, that it's just in your head, right? It's a chemical imbalance. But it turns out that the vast majority of people can actually be treated by external circumstances, lifestyle. It's actually what's going on in your life is causing depression.
Your environment. Yeah.
Your environment. And of course that ties back to the choices you're making, and it's a cycle. But drugs are not necessarily the answer. And so he's delving into the 8 modern causes of depression and the 8 solutions to it. And it's
very
blowing
cool.
my mind.
I think it's so great that literature like this exists right now, and that we're at a point in our society, globally, where like there's people that are standing up on certain soapboxes and saying like, hey, this doesn't have to be this way. We can skin the cat in many, many different ways. And when you're talking about depression, for example, I can't really relate to that personally, because I don't know that I've ever dealt with it, but I know others that have, and I know that they always seem to come back with the understanding from their medical advisors, GPs, etc. Like, oh, you should be on drugs, and then I look at things like just understanding the power of, or the influence like your own gut has on your mind, and your like what is going on in your stomach. Like, let's look at that. What are you eating? Like you said, like what external things. Like, what are you eating? How much water do you drink? Do you exercise? Did you get out in the sun today? Like, there's so many other things. I know nothing about depression, but I know like there are a few things that we all can say, like, oh, I feel happier when I do those things, right?
Yeah. Well, one of them is meaningful connection, and that's like that's one of the things I've always enjoyed about being around you, is that you are one of the most positive people I know. having meaningful connection with other like-minded people is one of the things that he talks about in the book. Like, that is literally one of the things that helps bring you up. When people, and today we're more often than ever, we're cut off from meaningful connections with other people. There's less community. We don't know our own neighbors. I mean, the list is long. And the stories he tells, this guy probably interviewed like 200 people for this book all around the world. And the stories he tells of the scientists, that there's people that have been working on these now what seem like cutting edge ideas, but they've been working on it for 20 or 30 years, and just the mainstream world and society wasn't ready for it. It was just take the drugs. And so it's been fascinating.
Oh, cool, man. I'm really excited that you're going down that rabbit hole. It's really inspiring.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, man. Two books. I mean, I could talk to you for hours about the books that I've read over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Like like my iPhone is just, I mean, I could just scroll through it, but there's a couple that I highly recommend. One of them is Elon Musk. It's by Ashley Vance, and it's just called Elon Musk, and then it's got a picture of him. But Elon Musk, written by Ashley Vance. I never really paid much attention to him. Like, it's kind of cool. Like, you hear the stories and you're like, oh, Tesla's cool. Like, but that's about it. Like, and there are people just like Steve Jobs. There are people that like worship him or like are so into him.
Right.
But when I read this book, man, it blew my mind. The stuff that he's accomplished, that his companies are accomplishing. SpaceX now to me seems like a way bigger deal than it was. Now that I realize like the reason why they're doing it and their motivations and the innovations that they've made, it's super inspiring. And it's a tale of like basically risking it all, basically every time, multiple times, risking it all, risking it all. Yeah. Like, holy crap. This guy, he believes in, in these missions that he's going on with these different companies. And now he owns multiple other companies too that are going to have a big impact on the world. Nimsdai, Beyond Possible. Again, like, I guess it's probably not going to show up, but
yeah, I'll put up the links in the show notes.
There you go. So there's this guy, Nimsdai. He's a former like SAS or Special Boat Squadron special operative from the UK, and he basically, after a 15 year career in the military, and he's originally from Nepal, I think it is.
Okay.
Nepal or Tibet, I'm not quite sure, but one or the other. I think it's Nepal. He basically leaves the service to get into mountaineering because he felt this huge calling to go on adventure and break limits. And something that he noticed about himself was that when he's in extreme situations like that, like, his body has an unnatural ability to recover. And so he wrote this book about basically his very rapid entry into the world of professional mountaineering. And prior to him, the story of the book is both his life story, but then mostly focuses on, in 2019, what he did was he was the first person to ever summit all the 14,000 foot peaks in the world in the shortest time in history. Like, he set records.
Wow.
And that includes Everest and, all the famous peaks. He did the world record before was something like 7 years that it took someone to do all those. He did it in 7 months.
Oh my God.
It's insane. And some of these, he has, at the end of the book, they list all of the world records that he broke in this 7-month journey, because not only did he do all the 14,000 foot peaks, or the 14,000ers that are higher than 14,000 feet,
yeah,
all around the world. And most of them are I think most or all are in the Himalayas. I think, don't quote me on that one, but he basically on that journey set several other records. Like, went up Everest, came halfway down, traversed over to another mountain, did that mountain, and then did a third mountain. Like, he did like these 3 peaks in something like 24 hours or some insane 30 hours, whatever it was. It was just nuts. Super inspiring. So those two guys, like, I think 2021 or heading into 2021, I definitely want to get into biographies, because you learn a lot. And this book in particular has a lot of mental toughness techniques, self-talk, feeding the courage wolf, like we were talking about earlier. That's a term from Mark Divine, which is another great book that I read a couple of years ago.
The Way of the Seal? No.
Way of the Seal. Yeah. And he has I think another book too that specifically talks about like the two wolves.
Okay. Yeah.
But those are awesome. Another one that might be a little controversial, maybe for some people, is the Carnivore Code, and it's about eating an all meat diet.
Yeah.
Eating nose to tail. I just started eating beef kidneys and like grass-fed beef kidney, grass-fed beef.
Yeah, I saw that. How were you had liver as well. How was it?
Yeah. It was edible.
Okay. Not
So
enjoyable.
I wouldn't call it enjoyable. I think when I was a kid, I ate liver and I threw up. So
Okay.
it was
So there's a
probably
bit of like stigma there.
oh yeah, 100%. Other people like I know other people have had bad experiences with it. Some people love liver and onions.
Yeah.
For me, I want to eat those things because liver is like one of the absolute most nutritious parts of the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a common misconception that it's the filter for all the bad stuff,
Right.
but that's not actually how the liver functions. It excretes
The
things
toxins.
exactly, it excretes things that break down the bad
Mm-hmm.
stuff in your body. So but it's
Mm-hmm.
not actually a storehouse for those things, right? Super high nutrients. So I wanted to add these things, bone marrow, collagen, that type of stuff. And a lot of this comes from me getting into hunting and wanting to eat like the entire animal, because if you're
Mm-hmm.
going to take an animal's life, I mean, you got to use all of it, right?
Yeah.
Don't waste it. So that book, I think, would definitely, some people today would be like, "What?" Because it's so contrary to what the mainstream narrative is now becoming with
Right.
vegetarianism and meat's bad for the planet, which a lot of that stuff is way more debatable than people like to
Yes.
acknowledge, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole other 68 podcast series that we
I
could do.
know. It is.
Um,
Limitless
either.
by Jim Quick. One more quick
Okay.
book.
Yeah. Go.
Limitless by Jim Quick. You should follow Jim Quick on Instagram. His that entire book is about the mind and about he talks about things like speed reading, improving your memory, but overcoming doubts and fears and things like that. It's an amazing book. He's a really interesting guy that had a brain injury when he was a child and so had learning disabilities, and it's about how he overcame those things, and that prompted him to become super fascinated with learning and how he could overcome all of his personal like deficiencies. And so that book's phenomenal. Definitely check it out. And I could keep going.
Yeah, man. Honestly, I think that you should have your own What Adam's Reading podcast or blog or something, because not only are you reading these books, but you are like articulating what's shared in them so well. And something I would love to do with you, like legit, we'll do this again. Like we're gonna do another. But I still have a couple more questions for you, but we're definitely gonna do another podcast because I want to dive into things like death and grieving, and I want to dive in more to like hunting and all that stuff. So we should do like an Adam Killam, Brad Bodnarchuk series. Um, where was I going with this?
You said you had a couple other questions.
Yeah, so I wanted to hold some space for you and Civilian Strong. I wanted you to introduce my listeners who maybe don't know what it is or why it exists or how they can engage with it. Like
Yeah.
this is your platform now, so speak to the listeners and say like, "Hey guys, this is what we're about. This is what we're doing, and we'd love to have you a part of it."
Awesome. Well, Civilian Strong, I'll explain the concept and then talk about sort of what we're like. The concept of Civilian Strong is that today, like, I mean, for a period of time, now, every day, and I hate to use the word average, but everyday people, let's not even use the word average.
Mm-hmm.
Everyday people are doing extraordinary things. And I think that in the past, we used to look to professional athletes, we used to look to the pros, um, to as examples. And I mean, you could use the NBA, the NFL. I'm not going to say MLB, but I'm just biased. But tennis players, whatever. And then we used to look toward to members of the military, the Navy SEALs, the Green Berets. You hear these stories, the SAS, the Foreign Legion. These were and then Olympians as well. Those were the men and women, especially Olympic athletes. Um, were the people that we looked up to as kids and for a long time, as examples of what's possible physically and mentally. And really it was physically, because it's only become what in the last 10 or 20 years that mindset improvement,
Mm-hmm.
awareness, mindfulness, all of those things, mental toughness. I would say even in the last 10 years is when David Goggins and some of these other guys have started to like pop up, where it's like it's mostly focused on the mind.
Mm-hmm.
But it used to be that we'd look to pros for examples of what was possible and what we should aspire to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think it's actually, there's far more people, just everyday people. It might be an accountant, it might be a school teacher, uh, who decided they wanted to run an ultra marathon, or decided that they needed to lose 200 pounds and then did it. And then they started running marathons, like there's
Mm-hmm.
people like that. There's Dan, the guy from CrossFit, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that, he moved up to Squamish and started running
Mm-hmm.
like marathons. I think his next goal, I think he's like a sort of a stocky
Mm-hmm.
power lifter guy, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and now he's working on running ultra marathons. I met a guy who was a high alpine paramedic whose son wanted to climb the seven summits, so they did it, and then he set the world record for becoming the youngest person to ever summit Everest. I think back in 2010, he was
Well,
13 years old when he summited Everest, and so there's people out there that are doing these extraordinary things, and they're not pros. They might become pro in the process, like of
mm-hmm.
whatever they're right. Like if you're running an ultra marathon, even if you're not getting paid, like I'm going to say you're kind of a pro level athlete in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion, but you probably weren't on your journey to getting there,
Right.
right? And so the concept behind Civilian Strong was that it's actually civilians, it's actually the everyday person now that has the ability to do the extraordinary. And part of what I wanted to do with the was create a brand that told those types of stories, because I find those stories so incredibly inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
We started off with um, we started off selling coffee. I was just looking for a label. Here we go. So not that I ever recommend you drink decaf, but we started off selling coffee, and I've been experimenting with putting sayings, and I don't know if that's going to display properly, but
Yeah, no, we got it. Yeah.
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 So coming up with a bold sort of and there's the sticker on the mug.
Yeah.
Um, Started off with developing sort of a look and feel, and coffee being the first product. But really, I think um, the idea behind coffee is that a lot of people in the CrossFit community, the Spartan community, if you look at people that run, cycle, there's a big overlap too. And this was another thing that I saw in the market. I was like, I was doing CrossFit for a long time, starting back in 2006, like way back, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I hunted, I snowboarded, I did all these other things, and a lot of people today won't just do one thing. And I thought that was the other thing that was really interesting. I was looking around and seeing, lots of people doing all sorts of things, and especially if you're in Vancouver or Colorado, like if you're in a city that gives you access to a variety of terrain, like the mountains and the ocean, like you tend to do lots of different sports.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to find a way to speak to that group of people. And like you and I think they're interested in Nim's Dai's story, and they're interested in, Jordan Romero and Paul Romero's story of climbing the seven summits. And so I wanted to find a way to like speak to that group and create products and serve that audience, because they inspire me. Um, the great irony of 2020 was that I quit my job in 2019. I had a really good job working for an ad agency in Boston. It was remote. I traveled a ton. It was very exciting. I went to Italy, Croatia, all over the U.S. Met some phenomenal people. I had a really good time there. Worked with a great crew, and I left that job on like a high note. I played a role in, as the VP of Business Development, I played a role in them making the Inc. 5000 in 2019. Got to go to the awards dinner, and it was a lot of cool experiences. And so I left the job wanting to create Civilian Strong, and I quit in, I think it was June. 4 weeks later, like in July, I think 4 or 5 weeks later, I went home to visit my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And within 3 days of me being there, she literally was in the emergency room, and it started this 3 month process, and
Mm-hmm.
ended up with her dying. And I stayed there. Like I basically left on a high to start a business full of confidence with saving,
Right.
like I had the mindset. I was in good shape. Uh, and then that happened. And the irony was like, the question has been whether or not to push on with this, or
Mm-hmm.
to quit, right, all year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And depression followed, lots of unhealthy habits, and it was like the where I ended up at the start of this year in 2020 was just so not where I had been even 6 months earlier.
Hmm.
And and to start a business that, or to want to build a brand that's all about mental toughness and resiliency, like it's taken it's taken everything for me to keep working on this despite what has happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I
Very weird.
appreciate you sharing that. And it actually
Yeah.
reminds me a lot of I don't know if you listen to or are familiar with the MF CEO podcast or
Yes.
the yeah, Andy Frisella. And
Yeah.
he says that about his journey a bit. Like he was almost 300 pounds and he was selling like, supplements to
Supplements.
like get healthy. And he's like, I was a fraud, dude. I was a complete fraud.
Yeah.
So he changed his life. And I think you can almost, again, this is me just projecting onto you as we wrap this thing up, is like, that probably is why you are in the spot that you're in. That's probably why you started this brand with this name, and why all of these things have happened for you is because like you need this brand like this brand needs you, right?
100%. I'm not, and I was just talking to a good friend of mine the other day who lives this lifestyle that we're talking about very much.
Mm-hmm.
He hunts and hikes and mountaineers and all this stuff. And he's in great shape and just good attitude. And we were talking, and he was like, I was saying to him, like, my goal with this is not to put myself up as like the influencer or the guru.
Right.
I want to showcase what other people are doing, and then I want to take the lessons and apply that to my own life. Like I'm literally on the journey of,
Yeah, yeah, totally.
not the guru on top of the mountain.
Yeah, I think that's important to discern as well. You're not saying like, "Hey, look at me, I know everything." And that's just not who you are as a person.
Yeah,
But I guess like to my point as well is like this, yeah, telling those stories, and then that's like for me in this podcast, like how this initially started. Like I really was selfish. I just wanted to download as much information as I possibly could to help me launch my business, to help my offering be even better. So like, what are people struggling with? What are people coming up against in regards to challenges? Can I help solve that? Yes or no? And then it was really great for me as from a data standpoint to say like, okay, this is what's going on in the world. This is where I feel like I can step in and offer. And um, like I said, this podcast, like pre-pivot to know what it is now, and even now has given me like way more than I've given it in regards to time and energy. Like it's crazy the amount of intel and,
awesome,
like I say, data that I've downloaded from all of my conversations, including this one. So
awesome.
I want to thank you for being a part of it. And let's 100%, only because my time on my end is tight today.
Yeah,
Let's definitely do round two, man. I would love to dive into so much more. But before I let you go officially, people have heard from a high level what Civilian Strong is. They want to engage with it or engage with you. How best they do that?
they can visit civilianstrong.com. My email is adam@civilianstrong.com if anyone wants to reach out or has any questions about the books or about the coffee or about the vision of behind the business. And we're also on Instagram at Civilian Strong Co. And things are really getting started. So it's not the polished presence that I want to present to the world, but like we talked about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
we're getting started with it as it is now, and pushing forward from there. And thanks for having me on today, man. We still got to talk about hunting on the next call.
Yeah, no, definitely. All the hunting, all the meat, all the liver,
All
kidneys,
the
all those
meat.
things. And the last thing I'll say in regards to, like you saying, it's not as polished. I don't know who said this, but I heard it a while ago. And it's always stuck with me. Is if your first version is, or sorry, if the version that you like produce to the world is perfect, you've waited too long. So it's
Yeah.
like you just got to put things out there. You just got to create, and be ignorant towards what people think and say to a certain extent. And just if it's within you, let it come out. So I encourage you to keep doing that. I appreciate you. I appreciate you sharing your time with me and the listeners, and I look forward to round two. I love and respect you, and I can't wait to chat again soon.
Awesome,
And
man.
thank you guys for tuning in as you do week after week. If it wasn't for you, this podcast literally would not exist because I'd be talking to no one, and Adam and I would be really lonely. We don't want that. Um, so you guys know what to do until next time. All you got to do is be good and do good. Dude, we did it. That's it.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thanks, man.